Hello, everyone. Well, this week we are going to take a look at the Victorian era's power couple. And by that I mean it's going to be a husband and wife team that were both had celebrity status. So think of, your current celebrity couples that, the power couples like the Beyoncé's and the Jay-Z's or used to be Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, although it no longer is. But now we've got Robert and Elizabeth Barrett, who would become Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Now, their relationship was an interesting one. It started off because Elizabeth Barrett had already become a poet of some stature. Right? She was already publishing and she was already famous. And Robert Browning, who wasn't quite as famous as she was a fan. So he wrote her some fan mail. She responded. The next thing you know, they're exchanging love letters and they end up getting married. And what's really interesting about that is that when Elizabeth Barrett became Elizabeth Barrett Browning, as we now know her as, her father actually disowned her. So, she had a very domineering father, and every time a daughter would get married, he would disown her, and that's what happened to Elizabeth Barrett when she fell in love with Robert Browning, and she became Elizabeth Barrett Browning. So, for Elizabeth Barrett Browning, we're going to be reading some selections from the Sonnets of the Portuguese. Now, our textbook has all 42 sonnets. I'm only going to have you read about less than half of those. I'm going to have you read 19 of them. But, take note of which numbers you're supposed to read. So, read those sonnets and see how they trace the evolution of Elizabeth Barrett's love for her future husband. Right? So, if you've ever heard the expression, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. That's Elizabeth Barrett Browning. That comes from Sonnet 41. So you're going to see from Sonnet 1 up to Sonnet 42 how her love develops for her future husband as she writes these. It's called Sonnets from the Portuguese because these poems, which are tame by today's standards, were considered risque at the time. And so they said, well, if it comes from Portugal, then we can make it risque, even though she was living in England when she wrote them. So, that's Elizabeth Barrett Browning. So you're going to trace her love for Robert Browning, and that's going to be your discussion question this week. Now, for the paper, I'm going to have you do a little something different. So Robert Browning was well known for something known as the dramatic monologue. And what a dramatic monologue is you see one half of a conversation. So you're going to read Porphyria's Lover. That one's not really a dramatic monologue. That one's a story about, well, let's just say it's a twisted love affair, and we'll leave it at that. But My Last Duchess is a dramatic monologue. And what a dramatic monologue is you're going to hear the Duke speaking, but you're not going to hear the person he's speaking to speaking. So what's happening here is the Duke is a widower, and he's trying to find a new wife. And back in the time when this story takes place, there were people called marriage brokers who would go to rich families and arrange marriages between, men and women, usually for financial gain of one or the other. So here we have a duke talking to a marriage counselor, and they're looking at a painting of Porphyria. And so, or not Porphyria, they're looking at a painting of the Duke's, now deceased wife. And he's talking about how she had a wandering eye. She liked to be a little flirtatious, and he didn't like that. And so he's going to defend himself. There is some hint that the Duke may have had something to do with the death, but it never comes out as nobody knows for sure, really. Because she did die at a very young age. So, what I'm going to have you do for your project this week is fill in half that conversation, right? To fill in the half of the marriage broker. So you're going to see where it looks like he's going to respond to something. And then you're going to ask yourself, well, what would the marriage broker have asked for him to have responded? So you'll fill in that blank. So you're going to take, for your project this week, the side of the marriage counselor, and we're going to put this conversation together. So that's the Brownings this week. Of course, there's the reading quiz and the discussion, and then, of course, that little project. So I hope you enjoy the Brownings, And we're going to see Elizabeth Barrett Browning again next week as well. But for this week, we're just going to concentrate on her poems from Sonnets of the Portuguese. And then we're going to do Porphyria's Lover and My Last Duchess for Robert Browning.